What if the deadliest weapon in history wasn't a sword, but a germ? In 1346, a Mongol army was laying siege to a strategic city when they were devastated by a mysterious illness. According to one incredible account, their commander made a horrifying decision to turn his own dead into ammunition. This is the story of the Siege of Caffa. It's a tale of how one desperate, alleged act of war became the legendary trigger for the Black Death, a plague that would kill millions and change the world forever. The Jewel of the Black Sea. Our story starts in the 14th century, in a glittering city on the Crimean Peninsula called Caffa. A trading colony run by the Italian Republic of Genoa. Caffa was a hub of incredible wealth. Sitting on the shores of the Black Sea, it was the gateway between East and West, a bustling port where ships heavy with silk, spices, and silver sailed for Europe. Its formidable limestone walls, said to be around 40 feet high, protected a vibrant mix of cultures and commerce. But all that prosperity was sitting on a knife's edge. Caffa was an island of Christian European influence in a sea controlled by one of the most powerful forces on the planet, the Mongol Golden Horde. For years, a tense but profitable peace held between the Genoese traders and the Mongol Khans. But in 1343, that peace shattered. A street brawl in a nearby town between Italian Christians and local Muslims spiraled out of control, leaving a Muslim man dead. Panicked, the Genoese merchants fled to the safety of Caffa's high walls. The Mongol leader, Khan Jani Beg, was enraged. He demanded the city hand over the culprits. Caffa refused. To the Khan, this was an act of unforgivable defiance. He gathered his forces, and in 1343, the first siege of Caffa began. The first failure and the festering grudge. Jani Beg likely expected a quick victory. His Mongol warriors were the most feared soldiers of their age. But Caffa wasn't an easy target. The city's sea access meant it could be resupplied by ship from Italy. The siege dragged on, and after an Italian relief force killed 15,000 of his troops and smashed his siege engines, Jani Beg was forced to retreat in 1344. But the Khan wasn't a man who accepted defeat. His anger festered. For the next year, he rebuilt his army and gathered more terrifying siege weapons. In 1345, he returned. This time, there would be no mistakes. The Mongol army descended on Caffa again, determined to starve the city into submission. The siege was grueling, cutting off all land-based supplies. Inside the walls, things grew desperate. Outside, the Mongols waited. They were confident time was on their side. They were wrong. As the siege stretched into 1346, a new, unseen enemy entered the Mongol camp. It didn't carry a sword or a bow. It arrived silently, carried by fleas on the backs of rodents scurrying through the camp. The bubonic plague. The crowded, sprawling siege camp was a perfect environment for the disease to spread. It tore through the Mongol ranks with horrifying speed. Soldiers who were fearsome warriors at dawn were blackened, dying corpses by dusk. The mighty Mongol army was being annihilated, not by Genoese crossbows, but by an enemy they couldn't even see. Jani Beg's campaign was collapsing. His army was dissolving into a plague-ridden graveyard. The horrifying solution. For the defenders on Caffa's walls, the sight of their enemy disintegrating must have felt like a miracle, but their relief was short-lived. This is where the story takes a legendary, horrifying turn, thanks to an account written later by an Italian notary named Gabriele de Mussi. He wasn't there, but his telling of the events would echo for centuries. According to de Mussi, Jani Beg, watching his army rot, was pushed to an act of diabolical desperation. If his army was doomed, he'd make sure the Genoese died with them. He decided to weaponize the very disease that was destroying him. The order was given. The Mongols allegedly began loading their dead onto their trebuchets, the massive catapults built to hurl boulders. Imagine standing on the battlements, watching not rocks but human bodies, arcing through the sky. De Mussi wrote that the air was filled with a pestilential stench as the corpses were hurled over the walls. The defenders scrambled to get rid of the bodies by throwing them into the sea, but the damage was done. The Mongols likely didn't understand germ theory, but they operated on the medieval belief that disease spread through, quote, putrid or poisonous air. By filling the city with the smell of death, they believed they could transmit the plague. And it seems to have worked. Soon the citizens of Caffa began showing the same horrifying symptoms. This gruesome act is now widely seen as one of the earliest and most infamous, alleged instances of biological warfare in history. This single, horrifying story from the Siege of Caffa shows how the intersection of war, disease, and desperation can create a turning point in history. If you find these deep dives into the dramatic and often dark chapters of our past fascinating, take a moment to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss where this story goes next. The escape and the unwitting transmission. By 1347, the siege was over. The Mongol army, too devastated by the plague to continue, had withdrawn. But for the Genoese survivors inside Caffa, the horror was just beginning. The city was a death trap. With the Mongols gone, they saw only one option: escape. They scrambled aboard their trading galleys, desperate to flee the pestilence. They packed what they could and set sail for the safety of home. They didn't know they were carrying a hidden, deadly cargo. The plague was with them, in infected people, and in the infected rats and fleas hiding in the ship's holds. These ships became floating coffins. Their first major stop was the magnificent city of Constantinople, where the plague was unleashed with catastrophic results. From there it spread. In October 1347, 12 Genoese galleys arrived in the port of Messina, Sicily. Locals watched in horror as ships crewed by dying sailors with strange black swellings tried to dock. Authorities quickly ordered the death ships out of the harbor, but it was too late. The plague had a foothold in Europe. From Sicily, it leaped to the Italian mainland. Whether the plague arrived only on these ships from Caffa or on dozens of other vessels from across the Black Sea, the result was the same. The survivors of Caffa had become unwitting couriers of the apocalypse. The Black Death and the debate. What followed was one of the greatest public health disasters in recorded history. Between 1347 and 1351, the Black Death swept across Europe. It's estimated to have killed between 30% and 50% of the continent's entire population, as many as 50 million people. The world was turned upside down, and the consequences, like massive labor shortages, helped bring an end to the age of feudalism. For centuries, the story of Jani Beg and his corpse catapults has been held up as the dramatic origin of this catastrophe. But is it true? While the biological attack is considered a plausible explanation for how the plague got inside the walled city, modern historians now seriously question its role in the wider pandemic. Scholar Mark Wheelis, writing for the CDC, argued that the event was likely unimportant in the grand scheme. After all, Caffa was just one of many trading ports. He and others point out that overland caravan routes and other maritime trade could have easily carried the plague westward on their own. In this view, the ships from Caffa were just one of many streams of infection, not the single source. In fact, a leading hypothesis today is that the plague spread to Europe through grain shipments that resumed from the Black Sea region after the conflict ended. Some historians have even questioned the feasibility of the catapult story itself, arguing that launching a large number of decomposing bodies with medieval artillery would have been incredibly difficult. The entire model of how the plague spread is also up for debate, with some scientists suggesting human fleas and body lice, not just rats, were the main carriers, which would help explain its terrifying speed. So was the Siege of Caffa the first great act of biological warfare that unleashed hell on Europe? Or was it just a macabre footnote in a much larger, inevitable pandemic? The honest answer is, we don't know for sure. The catapulting of plague-infected bodies into Caffa remains a chilling story about the brutality and desperation of war. It very likely happened to some degree, and was devastating for the city's people. But whether the fleeing survivors were the sole carriers of the apocalypse, or just one of many tragic routes for the disease, their escape coincided perfectly with the Black Death's arrival in Europe. The story of Caffa serves as a powerful and terrifying reminder of a time when armies allegedly weaponized disease, and a desperate retreat from a single city preceded the deaths of millions. It marks the moment where the horrors of medieval warfare and the unstoppable force of a pandemic collided, creating a legend that would change the world forever.